Last week I started with collage. I really didn't get into anything that had to do with portraiture. It was just building up a surface with texture and color and starting to make some interesting shapes and compositional divisions that hopefully will serve as a nice backdrop or background for the portrait. You'll remember I talked about this frog tape and its saturated green color and how that can possibly affect the color decisions that you make as you're doing the portrait, and how that might not be a good thing because that frog tape ultimately is not going to be part of the composition, it's going to be removed. Liz Hooker sent me an email and suggested that I cover up the frog tape. It's a very good suggestion and I'm going to do that now. Very simple suggestion of taking some regular masking tape and covering up the green color. There's no reason that we have to leave it there. Also, this is going to have the benefit of reestablishing where the boundaries are of our composition. So this will be a clear indication of the state of the actual composition. So when we cut out all the excess collage elements and excess tape and all the stuff after we're done, it's going to be reduced basically to this size. After the demonstration last week, I decided that I did want to do a photo transfer after all. I did a drawing on a regular piece of paper using this as the source material. Let's see, I took some creative liberty and made myself skinnier. Not entirely intentional, but it's my right. So I made a drawing. I imported that drawing into the computer and then I manipulated it somewhat with Photoshop. You'll notice that the image is reversed here. It's a mirror image because through the process of transfer it will be returned back to the correct orientation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a photo transfer of this image onto the collage that I did last week. So I get the advantage of being able to manipulate the color of the drawing. So it's not going to be the color of graphite, it's going to be this nice blue color. I get the advantage of not taking as much time here in the demonstration. I'm not going to get all the graphite there on the surface of the paper to mix in with paint and make things muddy. So there are some reasons that this is a technique that works well for what I'm trying to accomplish, rather than doing the drawing directly on the collage, although that would be a fine approach as well. I made 3 different versions, or 3 different printouts, different sizes. I couldn't decide exactly how this was going to, which side would be the best. I could have been a little bit more exact about it and actually scanned the collage itself in and tried putting the drawing on and seeing what size fit best, but I thought I'd just show you another way. Just print out a bunch of different sizes and kind of get a feel for it that way. I think I'm going to end up using this largest size. Nah, I take that back. I'm going to do this medium size. And I'm going to cut it out so you can see a little bit more clearly what the boundaries or what the edges of this are. So today's demonstration, I'm finally getting around to it. I'm going to transfer this drawing that I already made onto the surface that I created last week, this collage. Okay, so that's the size of the image. Remember, it's going to be reversed. And I took this picture yesterday thinking that it might be nice to have my image looking over this way where there's this break in the collage. So I took a picture specifically for this composition, thinking that it might work well. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to place it right there. I can see kind of a ghost of the image there and see more or less where it's going to be placed. And I think that's going to work well. You'll notice that even the background around the drawing has quite a bit of blue information there. So when I do a transfer, you're actually going to see a little square of blue, like this blue haze around the composition where that doesn't extend out into the edges of the picture plane. So that might be a problem, but I'm going to hopefully be able to fix that with a little bit of painting with a little bit of glaze. So today I'm not going to talk too much about how to do photo transfer. In fact, that's not really what I mean to get into the specifics of how you prepare for photo transfer, what types of supplies you need. I'm just going to cover that very quickly here. Really, I just want you to be able to see the result as one step in this process, because I've already done a fairly in-depth demonstration of photo transfer that's already online. I'll include links to that photo transfer demo on the website as soon as I get the website up and running, which hopefully will be this week. But if you want to see a more in-depth discussion or demonstration of photo transfer, you can find that on my YouTube channel if you just search on YouTube for photo transfer. Usually I'm the first or the second to pop up. But essentially what I've done here is taken matte medium, which is glue, and put a fairly liberal layer onto the surface here. And then now I'm going to take my drawing and I'm going to put it face down into the wet matte medium. The matte medium is only on the surface of the collage and not anywhere on the actual drawing itself. And then I'm going to squeegee out any excess matte medium from around the paper's edge. And that is simply so it doesn't take as long to dry, and so I make sure that the whole image comes in good contact with wet matte medium. All right, and I'm trying not to get any matte medium on the back of the drawing here. Whoops. Because that will make it more difficult for me to rub the paper off the back. Then I'll just wipe off the excess matte medium from around the edges here. It's not necessarily bad that it's there, but it will leave a little bit of texture if it's left on real thick like that. I used a blow dryer to dry the matte medium that I used for this transfer. Should be dry enough so that I can remove the paper and my drawing will be left behind as a transparent layer on top of the collage, so that anything that, remember that in photocopies, any printout that's done on a piece of white paper, it's relying on the white paper for any light values. So anything that's white or light in the image is going to be transparent when you transfer it. So you're going to see everything that's behind it, or that you're layering it on top of, which is one of the nice things about doing a transfer as well. One of the difficulties of doing transfers is that sometimes the image doesn't stick very well and it starts to pull up and break up in ways that maybe you didn't intend or want. But it looks like enough of the drawing is going to stick here that I'll be able to use it just fine. You don't want to use too much water. Sometimes too much water, you can start actually weakening the collage or the surface that you're transferring to, and it can start tearing because you're putting quite a bit of stress on layer underneath just by rubbing on it so much. So don't add too much water to weaken that. It also is better if it's not super wet, because you get a little bit more friction when it's a little bit wet but not too much. And that little bit of extra friction helps get the last little bit of paper fuzz off. Okay, so that's actually I think it's gonna turn out really nice. A little bit more here. All right. I'm going to dry it off a little bit just so I can see if I have any more paper fuzz to remove. And usually you can kind of feel it. Looks like I do up here. When it's wet, the paper fuzz goes transparent. So sometimes you think you got everything off, but then it dries and everything you get kind of a fog of paper fiber. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, that little bit of blue, even in the area around the portrait, is going to show up as a square. And I could have avoided that by cutting out the drawing around and not, or in Photoshop I could have made all of that white, but I kind of wanted to see if how it would look when I actually got it on there. I'm not too crazy about it, turns out. So maybe it wasn't such a good decision. But that's part of the art making process, is sometimes you take chances and they don't work out, and sometimes they work out really well. Again, another reason doing this transfer is because I like how it's going to let the collage come through in some areas. One final thing that I wanted to do today is, I've got a wet paper towel with a little bit of ultramarine blue and burnt umber, and I'm mixing it with matte medium to make it more transparent. And what I'm doing is just going to glaze some dark value onto these shadow areas, including the hair. And what I'm trying to do is begin getting a little bit of three-dimension, a little bit of modeling in to the portrait. That I'm going to continue in the next step. In the next step, I'm going to use oil paint to bring out some of the highlights. Okay, so I see a little bit of shadow right there. There's shadow kind of below the lip. I did a little bit of modeling. I did a little bit of value work with the hatching, with these lines. But it's still, with just those lines, it's still pretty flat. There's not a whole lot of value contrast. So a little bit of modeling there. I'm going to add a little bit of the burnt umber. So far I've just been using ultramarine blue. A little bit of the burnt umber. So after doing this little bit of paint, because I've been working with acrylic, I could go back in and do more collage. I could also go back in and do more photo transfer if I wanted to do even more layers. Once I start painting on it with oil paint, I can't go back anymore and do anything with the matte medium. So no transfer, no collage, because you can paint on top of acrylic with oil, but you cannot paint on top of oil with acrylic. It only goes one way. Once we start painting with oil, we've got to finish with oil. So make sure that you're ready, or you're done with all the collage, you're done with all your ideas of using photo transfer before you move on to the next step. With acrylic, glazing is a little tricky because you don't want to, if it's oil paint, you can just remove a little bit if you put too much on there. With acrylic, it dries so quickly that you got to be careful not to add too much color, and instead you just kind of creep up on it. It's better to be too transparent to begin with, and then just add more if you need, rather than going too opaque. And I'm going to bring that shoulder out over. And make that more opaque. All right, so let me give you one last look of what we've got here. We've got our original collage underneath. I just did a photo transfer of a drawing that I manipulated in Photoshop. I did it as a pencil drawing. I scanned it into the computer, manipulated it, added blue, and then on top of the photo transfer, I glazed some dark values in the hair there and started creating a little bit more modeling. Right now we've got this really bright red cutting right through the eyes. I think that's a little too strong, and it's getting in the way of being able to see that likeness. So I've got to deal with that. I'm feeling like this little hazy square that is going around my head isn't working quite yet, and I need to figure out how to integrate that more. And we're going to add some highlights to the face with opaque oil paint to model it even more, make it feel more three-dimensional, add more color, and also to make the face stand out from the background. Right now the lightest value is this cloud in the background, so somehow we got to make the face more dominant or stand out more than the background. So that's what we'll be working on next week, and we'll finish the project and hopefully be happy with the results.